director of the gender clinic at the most prestigious children's hospital in the country saying that children know seemingly from the womb that they are transgender.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
and it's things like a girl trying to pee standing up, a boy who doesn't want to get a haircut, playing with the opposite gender toys, or trying on a sibling's clothing. These are all signs your child is transgender and can be treated. And I think people knew that these gender clinics were doing kind of weird stuff, but they didn't understand it. And they knew these kids were struggling, and they have faith in hospitals. But then they see all these videos and they go, wow, there is absolutely nothing to this ideology. That's insane. I was a tomboy. I played with boys' toys. Or these little boys with 3 big sisters. Of course, they're going to play dress up with their sister's clothing.
Yeah.
It's called play.
Yeah.
It's not transgenderism. It's called play.
Yeah. Welcome to Conversations with Peter Boghossian. Coming up, we'll be talking to Billboard Chris about a very wide range of subjects, and I hope you enjoy the conversation. Chris, thanks for joining me today. Appreciate it. It's good to see you again.
Thanks for having me. This is fun.
It's a pleasure. And so we're in London now. What brings you to ARC, by the way?
I got invited. Jordan Peterson invited me. So, yeah, I've been on a mission for a little over 3 years to create awareness about what I consider to be a child abuse scandal, giving kids puberty blockers, cross-sex hormone surgeries. And I think really starting this year, it's been great. Jordan Peterson's been helping to boost a lot of my tweets to get more exposure. And I've got him in my corner now. So he invited me out here.
So does it, before we jump into it, does it bother you that people are now, and I'm not talking about Peterson, I'm talking about people in general, they're now like in your corner or supporting you, whereas they didn't when it was hard, whereas they didn't, you know what I mean?
Wow. You're the first person to ask me that question. I love it. So I get it. In the beginning, I'm a total unknown, and I think people thought maybe I was just eccentric, and they don't know me, so there's natural suspicion. I'm sure there's still a lot of suspicion from some people. And my method of activism or awareness or whatever is different. It's actually old school. It's super low tech. I go outside and I talk to people face to face, like humans are supposed to do, like we've done for couple 100,000 years since we've been on this planet. But this topic is so toxic in some circles, and it generates a lot of controversy, and I deal with a lot of violence and a lot of angry people.
And you've also been assaulted, just to be clear.
Yes, I've been assaulted dozens of times. I've had my arm broken by Antifa. I've been arrested twice after getting assaulted, banned from walking on the streets of Vancouver by the Vancouver police. But I'm as calm as can be. I just have conversations with people. And when I get violent people coming at me, I just take it. I don't even respond. But I did, for a long time, I didn't really have a lot of support. And I don't know. I thought, what's the holdup for some of these people, you know? Because I've been doing this for quite a while now. But it's just one of those things. It takes time for people to get to know who you are, to get to trust you.
Is that what it is, though? Or is it now that it's easy? And now that it's easy, you can plug into a community. Whereas when it's hard, you don't want to say anything. You're fearful. You don't want the mob to come for you. I just don't respect that.
There's some of that too.
Yeah.
It's both things.
Yeah.
Some of the people who are already talking about this subject
Yeah.
just didn't know who I was. So they just kind of do their own thing. And I get that for some people, I probably look ridiculous out there because I'm a human sandwich board. And traditionally, these are people talking about the end of the world or whatever.
Right.
But I try to dress well and just have conversations. And I do get a lot of respect out on the street because this is one of those topics that people are afraid to talk about. So they see me with my message, children cannot consent to puberty blockers. Right. And they respect that just for the bravery it takes to do that in some of these places. But there are people who were afraid to talk about this 3 years ago who aren't now, who fully support me. And I get it. They were just too afraid to talk about it because they didn't want to get canceled or whatever. But I think we need to have grace for all of these types of people because it's a difficult conversation.
You can have grace, but that doesn't follow that I should respect them equally. I'm just throwing that out there. So we've done 2 events together, one at University of Eugene and one at Portland State University. And I wrote about this. One of the things that I found was interesting. So I want to ask you about changes that you've seen and what kind of things people say to you. And then I want to talk to you about tactics or strategies that you use for conversations. But
Sure.
one of the things that I noticed in James Klug,
Yeah.
excuse me, we talked about this subsequently, was that someone would come up to you and say, you're a liar. Like literally, you're a liar. You're a liar. This is not happening. You would calmly present them with the fact that this is actually happening. And instead of saying, wow, geez, maybe I was wrong, they would say, it's a good thing this is happening. Just talk to me about that for a minute.
All the time. So 90% of the conversations I have are supportive people or people that just don't know anything. And so with them, you can just have a normal conversation. You just go wherever it goes. You explain what's happening. Most people are aghast that we're stopping puberty in children and giving them the wrong sex hormones and all that. But for the people who are more on the fence or are antagonistic, yes, they'll say you're lying. They'll say puberty blockers are reversible. They'll say surgeries aren't happening on kids.
That's another one. Right.
Yeah, they'll say surgeries aren't happening on kids. It's not true. It's illegal under 18, I hear all the time.
Right.
And so you can easily refute these arguments now and show them all the evidence in the world, but they don't actually want the evidence. Because as soon as you show them, they'll say, well, yeah, sure, actually, that's good that that's happening. Or you'll say, schools are hiding from parents that their own child has a new name and new pronouns, which is outrageous to hide this from parents as a matter of policy,
right,
as though parents are by default abusers.
Right.
But they'll say that's not happening. As soon as you can show them evidence that it is, they'll often say, well, that's good because kids are just obviously afraid of coming out to parents. So they don't
I love that
know.
idea of coming out too, right?
Right.
It's as if there's a parallel between that and being gay.
Right.
Which there's not.
So some people don't want to know the truth. And with them, on the spot, people don't want to be proven wrong. And they've come in this maybe a little hot, a little antagonistic. You're not going to change the mind of that person on the street in that moment. So there's a couple tactics that I employ in those situations. The first would be to find some common ground, find something that we agree with. And so, for example, my positive message that I always send is that there's no right way to be a boy or a girl.
Right.
That if a girl wants to climb trees and play in the dirt and hates wearing dresses, well, she's still a beautiful girl.
100%.
They all agree with that. The most radical leftist will agree with that statement, that we shouldn't stereotype kids. But they have this blind spot where they don't see that they're pushing stereotypes on these kids to such a degree that they're now advocating for changing the body of a child just because they're gender nonconforming. What? That's crazy. But they have this blind spot. They don't get it. They don't see it. So you just have to find a common ground with them because that brings down the temperature of the conversation right away. You say something they agree with. Now they don't see you as this evil figure that they thought was trying to kill trans kids. You're saying something that they agree with. And in that moment, you've created this cognitive dissonance where there's two competing ideas going on in their brain.
Right.
One, first thought was, this guy's a bad guy. He's against trans kids. Second thought was, I totally agree with what he's saying.
Right.
They have to make sense of this somehow now in their head. So they may go home and think more about it later.
Okay, so you start with, and Reed and I do this with the Spectrum Street Epistemology, you start with a claim people agree with.
Yeah.
And then from there, do you ratchet it up, or is it the next claim? Is it like another claim that you say that's kind of like, well, yeah, probably, or is it just like children cannot consent to puberty block?
Most of my strategy in these conversations is to ask them questions. So it's the Socratic method, I guess. I want to get them thinking. If you view this as a cult, and there are many, many parallels to cults with what's going on with gender ideology, a cult member never comes out because you tell them that they're wrong.
Right.
They always come out because they start questioning it themselves. In fact, the entire time they're in that cult, in the back of their head, they have doubts. They know there are problems going on, but they self-police. They stop themselves from being able to explore their doubts more. So our job really with these conversations, these more difficult conversations with the antagonistic people, is to get them questioning their own beliefs. So what does it mean for a girl to be a boy? I'll ask this all the time. And just pause and give them the time to think. And they don't have an answer because there is no answer. But it gets them thinking. What is a transgender child? What does it mean to be transgender? They can't answer this. A frequent response will be, well, I don't know because I'm not transgender.
Right.
So I'll say, well, statistically, we've got half of these kids are on the autism spectrum. These are kids who've suffered abuse and trauma. Kids who are in state care are way overrepresented. So why are more foster kids transitioning? Right? These are questions that get them thinking. But if we can't even define what it means to be transgender child, shouldn't we be able to define that before we're sterilizing kids?
For sure. I'm curious, is the reason that there are more kids who suffer from this because it's a contagion? Is that the reason?
These are kids who are all struggling. They're all dealing with other mental health issues. They've got neurodiversity, like kids on the autism spectrum. Kids in state care, they've had bad home lives. They've been abused. They might have been sexually abused.
Yeah.
A lot of these girls and boys who've been sexually abused, it's not rocket science to understand that if a girl's been sexually abused for years, she's not loving being a girl. And if you can give her some out where she can become a boy and escape what for her is the greatest source of her trauma in her life, of course some of these kids are going to jump at that. But when you look at the statistics, all these kids are struggling with other things. So they're just misfits and they're feeling bad. And they're now being told that the source of their trauma and their upset and their depression is gender.
Right. So when you have these conversations, I just want to make sure I get this right. You find something they agree upon first, and then you ask them questions. The point of that is what? To figure out what they believe, or they already tell you what they believe?
The people who come in more aggressive, they believe they always have really 3 arguments.
Okay, let's go over those.
The number one argument I hear every time is that kids will kill themselves if you don't transition them. They have all been told this lie. A lot of them have been told it in high school and then in college. It's primarily young people pushing this. A lot of young women are pushing this.
Yeah.
And they believe that kids are killing themselves. So they think they're the compassionate ones because they're saving kids from suicide. But that's a lie.
Okay, that's the first one.
That's the first one.
Kids are killing themselves. What's the second one?
Puberty blockers are reversible.
Okay.
So they've been all told this. The sales pitch is that they're going to pause puberty in these children so they can explore their gender identity. Because if I were to steelman the argument on the other side, it's that if a girl were to develop into a woman, well, you can't undo that, right? If a boy were to get a deep voice and broader shoulders and develop, and get a hairy face, well, you can't undo that. So they want to keep these kids looking neutral. And so the argument is that this just buys them time to explore their gender identity. And so the common source of agreement here would be that, sure, if you put a kid on puberty blockers for 3 months and take them off, not too much harm done. Puberty will resume. But we know in practice, from Gender Clinic's own statistics, 98% of kids, when you start them on puberty blockers, they go on to cross-sex hormones. If you leave them alone, in the vast majority of these cases, their gender dysphoria will desist. And there's a new documentary that just came out in Holland a few days ago, where they're looking into the original study that was done in Holland that gave birth to what's called the Dutch protocol, which was then imported.
Before we go down that rabbit hole, I want to get the third reason, though,
sorry,
if you don't mind. Yeah. What's the third reason?
The third thing is they try to sidetrack the conversation onto intersex people. They believe that people
They did that with us too.
They believe that people with intersex conditions aren't male or female. So intersex conditions, we should more accurately call disorders of sexual development. These are genetic disorders. People have chromosomal abnormalities. These are medical conditions. Turner syndrome, for example, these females only have a single X chromosome. Or Klinefelter syndrome. Sometimes these boys are born with ambiguous genitalia. Their testicles might be internalized. So in very rare circumstances, they might have thought they were a girl when they were born. This is extremely rare, but they're still 100% male. And all these different disorders of sexual development, there's several of them. They're all different medical conditions. They're all either male or female. But these people don't believe that because they've been lied to.
Okay.
So
So
they're just trying to sidetrack the conversation because they don't want to have the actual conversation. They want to pretend this is about something.
and the actual conversation is children cannot consent to puberty
Right.
blockers, which is literally right on your board.
Correct.
Okay. Hence Billboard Chris.
That's right.
Okay. So you build rapport or you ask them the questions. You know, okay, so those are the three most common. How often do you hear
Oh,
another reason? Not often.
not often.
Okay, so
There's
those
really
are the
these three main ones.
Okay, those are
You
the
might hear
three.
the odd other thing, but some people will say, well, puberty blockers are given to kids for precocious puberty. You'll hear that sometimes.
I have a friend whose child is on.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's an easy objection to handle. Precocious puberty is a medical condition. I get it's normally a product of some other underlying disorder. But this is where a girl under the age of 8 or a boy under the age of 9 is entering into puberty.
Right.
So you don't really want your 6-year-old girls having their period.
Right.
And I get it in that case. I get it. But even then, they're going to give them puberty blockers for a while, take them off so that normal puberty can resume. That's a totally separate issue than what we're talking about here, which is 12-year-old girls who now think they're boys.
Okay, let me throw something out, something that we do. There are many ways to do this. There's no right or wrong, but it's often referred to as a real reason check. A real reason check is you say, well, what is your best reason for believing that? And they will tell you something. And you say to them, okay, let's take that reason off the table. If that reason were off the table, would you still believe it? And if the answer is yes, then that may not be the real reason. There may be another reason for why they believe it. They may be just verbal behavior telling you, well, I believe this, not to go down this rabbit hole, but it could be a social thing. So not a reason at all, but someone's listening to them. They want to save face. So they could have nothing to do with a reason. If they say, if you say to them the real reason check, okay, so let's take that reason off the table. Would you still believe? If they say, absolutely not. There's no way I would believe it. That's the real reason. So do you ever play with stuff like that?
Yeah. I used to be an investment advisor. So you study sales tactics.
Yeah.
This is a sales thing too. If someone has an objection and you handle that objection, well, if they were a serious prospective buyer, then you would be able to close the deal if you handle this objection or maybe one other objection. But if they keep coming up with more and more and more and more, these are all fake objections.
Yeah.
Right? They don't actually think that's their reason. They just have some ideological reason or they're not interested.
Right.
Right? So with most of these people who give these objections, they don't actually want to know the truth. They're just trying to prove you wrong.
Correct.
They're trying to win a conversation, not have a conversation.
Okay. So you said something before a long time ago in a conversation I want to revisit, that people, they won't change their mind in real time.
Not usually. It's pretty rare.
Yeah. So I've also found that. Have you had experiences where either people have emailed you or they've physically come up to you in person and said, you know what, you said this, you got me thinking, and now, have you experienced that? And if so, how?
I've experienced that probably 150, 200. Yeah.
Wow.
I get emails all the time. I do change the mind of people on the street fairly often if they're kind of on the fence, like they're not sure. I'm reminded of one 80-minute conversation I had outside the University of Pennsylvania. A gay black man rode by me on his bike, swearing at me, and I challenged him to a conversation, and he came back,
Good for
and
him.
a lot of people are having these adrenaline rushes, and his face was actually ticking, and he was shaking, because for them to even have this conversation in the real world,
Sure,
they're confronting a lot.
I love that distinction, in the real world as opposed to online.
Right.
Right.
But to his credit, we had this long conversation. I found sources of agreement right away. It calmed him down. And by the end of the conversation, he was fully on board. Because one of the arguments I made, which is true, is that this is harming kids who grow up to be gay.
100%.
Like him.
Yeah. Andrew Doyle's made that point. A lot of people have
Yeah.
made that point.
And he confided to me in this conversation. He didn't want this part on camera, but he confided some very personal stuff with me about when he was younger. He thought maybe he was a girl
Yeah.
just because he was so effeminate. But he grew up and he's a happy gay man.
Yeah.
So he totally gets it now.
Yeah.
but that's someone who was extremely aggressive at first, because for a lot of the people in the gay community, they see when they grew up, they were different. Maybe they were bullied, they didn't fit in. And without thinking too deeply on this, they now see so-called trans kids who are getting bullied or don't fit in or whatever, and they conflate the two, and they see it as the same thing. So they get really emotional about it. But if you can have a more logical, rational discussion with them, you can flip a lot of them.
Do you ever use confidence scales? Like, do you ever say to someone on a scale from 1 to 10, how confident are you that that's true?
No, I haven't worded it like that.
I'm
That's a
telling
good
you,
idea.
man, it is like a nuclear bomb in someone's cognitive structure. It is something that sets up a cascading series of questions. So this is what one of the things I do. We read and I put mats on the floor. Strongly agree, slightly agree, neutral, and then the other side. But so, how confident are you that that's true? So children cannot consent to puberty blockers, and they say, well, they're reversible. Well, how confident are you that that's true? And it's because belief isn't binary, right? It's like people believe things, they have different strengths of belief. You say, well, on a scale from 1 to 10, with 5 being maybe, 7 being I'm pretty sure it's true, 9 being I'm almost positive it's true, and 10 being you can fudge with the scale however you want, but that's the basics. The sentiment is there. 10 being I'm absolutely positive. And then when they give a number, so they say 9. Then the follow-up question would ask is in philosophy to call it a defeasibility question. So let's say that they say that they're 9 for these are reversible. Okay, what would it take to change your mind? What piece of evidence, what fact, what reason would you have to move you to the 8? Now, based upon the response they give, maybe they're just not a very thoughtful person. I mean, better than anybody. You speak to everybody. You have no idea we have no idea who's going to come up to us and talk to us. Sometimes we get experts, and if we do, that's great. Then I can learn something, have a good conversation. But I throw that out there as a possibility, like how confident are you that that's true? And then it's okay. So what would it take for you to go? And the other thing is, I'm always fascinated when people say nothing. Nothing. It would take literally nothing for me to believe that puberty blockers are not reversible. Like literally nothing. There's no amount of evidence that would it's fascinating to me.
A lot of people are like that. In the beginning, before I had a website with the studies up on it that I have, people would say, well, show me these studies. And I knew they didn't actually want to see them.
Correct.
They were just using it as an argument. So as soon as I had them up on my website and I pulled them up, guess what? Every time, they don't want to actually see them.
Right.
They never stick around. They just blow off the conversation and walk away.
So then the question is, well, why do they believe it? Well, there are a series of questions, but one is, okay, so then that belief is not held on the basis of evidence, right? Or how is that belief held on the basis of evidence if here's some evidence and you don't even take the time to repudiate it? You just don't even consider what the evidence is. So my question then is, why do they hold the belief if they either don't know the evidence or they're unwilling to look at the evidence? Like, what is the reason that they believe it?
So humans are very tribal.
Yeah.
And I think it's when they get into a group that has a certain number of shared agreements.
Yeah.
And in this case, this is like a cult where they all have these same beliefs. It's just too difficult for them to confront the truth. They can't do it. It would blow up their entire social structure. They're not
so belonging. So the a community, like they don't want to lose their community. That would be one reason.
That's a huge reason.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest reason.
I agree.
They would be seen as a bigot.
Yeah.
They're not allowed to hold the heterodox beliefs in this case. So they're not allowed to hold them by their community, so they don't even dare to hold them. They won't even confront the truth.
I'd love to live in a community in which the entire community was not based upon a conclusion, but based upon people who valued reason, evidence, and changing your mind. And if you change your mind from one position to another, you're like, oh, wow, that person changed. Hey, good for them. That's pretty cool. They discovered some new piece of evidence or some new reason they changed their mind. That's the kind of person I want to be friends with. That's the kind of behavior, the kind of intellectual virtue that I aspire to.
100%. Peter, I love being wrong.
Yeah.
I love it when people can show me I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I don't have any pride about it, but pride is this human failure. We
Yeah.
have so much pride in our own beliefs or our
Yeah.
understandings. People don't like to be wrong. I
Yeah.
don't mind being wrong at all. I'm happy to be wrong.
Yeah, that was Socrates' project. You know, he knew that he didn't know.
Exactly.
He knew that he didn't know, and so it's funny how we've moved away from that. But to be fair, that they did put him to death.
Right.
So there was a social consequence to this. Okay, so let's pause on the tactics for the. So something I've noticed from the videos, and tell me if this is if I've got this right, is that now I'm seeing far more people agree with you than I saw from even a year ago. Is that accurate or no?
Yes. So I always had tons of support when I was able to have these conversations. It
Okay.
doesn't take long to educate people about the basics of this. But in the beginning, nobody knew what was going on. Everyone said to me, "What the heck are puberty blockers?"
Yeah.
Very few people knew. Now there's wide understanding of the basics.
Okay.
Everyone, not everyone, but a huge percentage of the population now have some basic understanding that there is child transition going on, that they're giving kids puberty blockers, and they're against it. So right away, I'm getting fist bumps and high fives. And
Excuse me, but
sure,
the same frequency now as a year or 2 years ago?
more frequency now.
More frequency now,
every
okay.
month.
More frequency every month.
Yes.
And
there's-
what is causally responsible for that? More people know about it. They know about you. The culture has changed to make it more permissible to people to view that. What you tell me?
all of the above.
Okay.
So this wasn't being talked about on the airwaves at all 3 years ago. Now it's the number one cultural issue discussed on conservative media, certainly every day. I think there have been a few things that really moved the needle on this. One was Matt Walsh's documentary, What is a Woman?
Yeah.
When that came out, I heard from people all the time on the street.
Right.
Have you seen Matt Walsh's film?
Right.
That showed people how, the deans of universities or the top professor at the University of Tennessee for women's and gender studies can't even say what a woman is.
Right.
And they saw how there's absolutely nothing underlying this ideology. There's
Right.
no foundation to it.
Yeah, I was just in an interview and I said Hamas knows what a woman is. Like our Supreme Court justice doesn't know, but okay. So one of the things
So
that's yeah, go ahead.
That was big. Last year in August, another turning point was these videos that I tweeted out from Boston Children's Hospital. It was their own gender clinic produced all these videos.
Yeah.
And the first one I tweeted out was about gender affirming hysterectomies. And it started to take off. It was going a bit viral. And I thought I'd better record this because they're looking terrible.
Yeah.
And later that night, they deleted it from their YouTube
Wow.
site. So then I tweeted out my recorded version and I sent it to Libs of TikTok and to Matt Walsh, and they retweeted it. And that went very viral. And then I simultaneously recorded about 40 other videos that their gender clinic produced. They deleted all of them, but I kept tweeting them out. And we've got the director of the gender clinic at the most prestigious children's hospital in the country saying that children know seemingly from the womb that they are transgender.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And it's things like a girl trying to pee standing up, a boy who doesn't want to get a haircut, playing with the opposite gender toys, or trying on a sibling's clothing. These are all signs your child is transgender and can be treated. And I think people knew that these gender clinics were doing kind of weird stuff, but they didn't understand it. And they knew these kids were struggling and they have faith in hospitals. But then they see all these videos and they go, wow, there is absolutely nothing to this ideology. That's insane. I was a tomboy. I played with boys' toys. Or these little boys with 3 big sisters. Of course, they're going to play dress up with their sister's clothing.
Yeah.
It's called play.
Yeah.
It's not transgenderism. It's
Yeah,
called
yeah,
play.
yeah.
And those videos woke up a lot of people, and it started a movement in the whole conservative movement where they started looking into other children's hospitals.
Okay, so that's what I want to
And
ask
that
you
woke
about.
up a lot of people, and that got the legislators going too.
Okay, so this is what I'm very sincere. I'm not being facetious when I say this. I'm very sincere. What I cannot figure out about this is why is this a conservative Why is this a right-left issue? Why isn't this just an issue of what's the evidence? What's the standard of care? What are best practices? What does the data show? Let's look to literature of biology about what's the matter. Like, why is this an ideological thing? Like, I don't explain it to me.
So it's left versus right in the political realm.
Yeah.
When it comes to the politicians, Democrats versus Republicans, none of the Democratic politicians will say a peep about this.
Yeah.
But on the street level,
Yeah.
with the voters, it's not such a left versus right issue.
Okay, so go up again, please. Why is it that why would Democrats want to hand conservatives something to be right about?
The Democratic Party has essentially been taken hostage by the radical left in their party, the far left, because that is who's pushing this.
And so there is the claim then implicit in that they're purely ideological and utterly incapable of looking at evidence.
So no, but the more moderate Democrats who I know would, if you were able to sit down with them one-on-one in a private conversation, they would be against this. They won't say anything because then they're going to be called anti-LGBTQ. They're going to be labeled a bigot. They're not going to be a politician anymore. They won't get reelected. They won't have the support of Planned Parenthood and all these people who fund them. So they're just not allowed to voice their objections to this because it would be political suicide.
So
but at the street level, most Democrats support me. The Black community is my strongest supporters.
I've noticed that, yeah.
The Hispanic community, they're not down with this at all.
Yeah.
This is primarily a white liberal problem affecting kids in those families.
Have you ever asked anybody, why isn't this just an issue of evidence for when puberty blockers should be, like, why would we? It's fascinating to me. It's kind of special pleading. Like, why would we want to defer to everything else in our, like, how we invest our money, how we build planes when we're flying at 30,000 feet? Like, why would we want to live by evidence in literally every other realm? Okay, maybe not literally, maybe religion's different, but virtually every other realm except this one.
I don't think it is just this one, but this is one of the major ones.
This is a conspicuous one, to be sure.
I mean, this is ideology. This isn't science.
Yeah.
There's no truth to this whatsoever. The entire thing is a lie.
I know.
This was invented in the 60s.
Monstrously idiotic.
By a pedophile, literally, named John Money at Johns Hopkins University, who developed this theory of gender identity ideology.
Yeah.
He falsified his research, but other academics, people like Judith Butler and Michel Foucault.
Yeah, John Money, I mean, that there's a line of literature on that. That guy has done so much damage.
Yes. So it's all a lie.
Yeah.
We have sex.
Yeah.
We have sexes. We are a sexed species. We are male and we are female. Gender was used as a synonym for sex by most people forever. But the far left has taken the word gender and it now means something entirely different than sex. For them, your gender is a performance of sex stereotypes.
That's Butler. Yeah. And
we're all in drag, essentially, is what they believe. Performing stereotypes.
It's interesting because if you look at people like Dawkins and Jerry Coyne, et cetera, if you look at people in that space, they'll write not screeds, they'll write very clear. And it's one of the best questions ever. It's Eric Weinstein's question. It's going to be at dinner tonight. If there's a conflict between gender studies and biology, on which side do you err? And I had asked people at my former institution that, and they skillfully managed, there's never a conflict, or it's funny how people will, like, if you want to figure out what's true, just see who obfuscates the most. This, and they'll give a big story about this. And like, look, I'm asking you a direct question. Oh, by the way, this is one thing that I do that I talk about in my book, is that I write about. If you're having a conversation and someone's obfuscating, you just say to them, ask me that question. And then be like, what? And you say, well, look, ask me if there's a conflict between gender studies and biology, which side do you err? And you wait until they ask you, and then you say biology, and then you repeat the question to them, and you see what they say. Usually that modeling behavior is enough. Usually, I'm not saying it's always going to be the case, but what's the best argument that you've heard and if there isn't, that's totally reasonable. It's be like, what's the best argument you've heard in favor of Santa Claus? But but actually, this is dangerous. But have you heard a good argument in favor of any of this stuff?
Honestly, Peter,
Yeah.
100% honesty, no. Because there isn't one. Because there is no right way to be a boy or a girl. Girls are girls and boys are boys. Now, if a child has severe gender dysphoria
Yeah.
from a young age,
Yeah.
yes, we need to treat that. This is real. This is distress. This is self-loathing.
Right.
That exists. They're not trans kids. They're children with distress about their sex. But historically, even all these kids, almost all of them grew out of it. The most recent study we have that was done before puberty blockers followed 139 boys from a young age all the way up into their 20s, and 88% of them saw their gender dysphoria just desist. They grew out of it. 63.6% grew up to be gay.
Yeah.
So what the heck are we doing?
Okay.
Stopping puberty in children. There's a thing about humans where if they can do something, they will do it. There's always going to be some human that will do it. So this drug was discovered, Lupron. It's a gonadotropin-releasing hormone agonist. It's used for prostate cancer. But guess what? It also, what it does is it stops you from producing testosterone or estrogen. Right. So it also happens to stop puberty. So some doctor in the Netherlands got it in his head, oh, we can use this on these kids with gender dysphoria.
Right.
And from that has been born this whole wave of tens of thousands of kids getting sterilized and harmed and now getting surgeries.
Has anybody asked you if there's no right way to be a kid, a boy or a girl? Isn't that a kind of relativism?
No one's asked me that specific question, no.
What would your response to that be?
Well, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, sure. It's relative. Behavior is relative. Relative to what? Some boys are going to be more masculine than others.
And some more feminine than others. Yeah.
So that's fine.
Yeah. So there's no.
Why does behavior determine our sex or gender? It doesn't.
And it's fine morally if it's. I think part of this is and I'm not sure. It's interesting how many conservatives have. And again, I don't think this is a political issue. I sincerely do not think it's political.
But it's been made.
Yeah, and when I grew up, I'm 57. It was a lot of conservatives, maybe even the I think the majority, but I don't want to say that without knowing the data. But were really down on gays. Mm-hmm. The whole culture. In fact, I have 2 kids, both of whom are gay, and a boy and a girl. My daughter's adopted, and I'm wondering about the shift in values now. Because many of the conservatives, to me, let me just put all my cards on the table. I'm not even sure that the word conservative or the label conservative or liberal is useful anymore.
No, not really. It's more like authoritarianism versus freedom.
That's exactly what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I'm thinking.
And this is a common sense movement. This is just about truth. There is such a thing as objective truth, but in postmodernism, they've done away with that. There's your truth and my truth. And I remember the first time I heard that, I think it was Oprah Winfrey actually talking about your truth. And I said to myself, what the heck is this your truth business?
Yeah. Your truth is only good in matters of taste, not matters of fact.
Sure.
So let me tell you what's bothering me, and I don't know, maybe this is out of your purview. I am deeply disturbed that the people doing these surgeries, and yes, I mean to say this very deliberately, all of the administrative staff, all of them, the nurses, the administrators, people who weren't in the room, I am deeply disturbed that these people are going to get away with it. I'm deeply disturbed that these people will not see. Bracket the inside of prison for a moment. I'm deeply disturbed that these quote unquote surgeons are going to keep their licenses. We know they're going to keep their license. They're just going to say, well, I looked at but the
because
whole
they're
system.
Following the guidelines of the AAP.
Well, then why, okay. I'm trying not to be animated about this because it's so infuriating to me. So why aren't they losing their licenses? Why isn't there why do they get off scot-free? So somebody should be held accountable for this catastrophe. This isn't even a catastrophe.
So The American Academy of Pediatrics just a couple months ago announced they're finally conducting a systematic review of all the evidence.
Yeah.
Like what the NHS here in England did,
Yeah.
what Sweden did back in 2021. I don't believe they'll do it, honestly, because they're a corrupt organization.
They're ideologically captured.
Yeah.
But why do they get off scot-free? Why do they keep their medical licenses? Why aren't they in prison?
They're the ones who issue the licenses, right? It's these bodies, but they are starting to get sued now. So there's a new law firm in Texas.
Yeah.
4 men have just formed it.
I'm sorry, but are they being sued? Are they personally? Okay, then that's okay.
So just a few lawsuits just in the last couple of weeks, actually. The first lawsuit naming the AAP just came out 8 or 9 days ago. And it involves Jason Rafferty, who wrote the policy for the AAP a few years ago. He wrote it when he was still a resident.
Yeah.
He wasn't even a doctor yet. And it's not based on any evidence at all. But he was involved in the case of a girl in Rhode Island. So because he was directly involved in her case, they're now able to link the AAP into the lawsuit as well. So these other cases that will be involving Jason Rafferty, and there will be more coming, they'll also be able to bring in the AAP to it.
I have to push back on something.
Sure.
I'm not buying the fact that some medical sanctioning board says, look, if a medical sanctioning board said, hey, look, every once in a while, if you have a, I don't know, somebody, for whatever reason, we just pluck their eye out during surgery. Someone goes in for I'm not buying the idea that somehow that exculpates the person who plucks someone's eye out. This is too ghastly.
Right. So one of the problems is that until recently, the statute of limitations for medical malpractice, if you look at all 50 states, it ranged from 1 to 3 years for medical malpractice. Now, recently, there's about 20 states that have passed legislation to stop this. And usually in that legislation, they've extended the statute of limitations 20, 30 years. So we're going to see a lot more lawsuits. In St. Louis, at the Washington University Transgender Clinic, where Jamie Reed was a whistleblower, they've stopped the practice. Not because they got sued, because they were worried about getting sued, because the laws have changed. So just the fear of getting sued has caused them to say, we're not taking any more patients. So we're going to start seeing more and more pushback, and these guys aren't going to get away with it. And I'm confident.
You really believe that? Do you honestly believe that?
So one argument that the doctors have is that they were following WPATH standards of care or whatever.
Orders.
But they haven't always been following orders, and they're getting sued. They're getting civilly sued right now. I'm sure there will be some criminal trials as well, and I'm confident this whole thing about gender-affirming care will end up in the Supreme Court. But they're not all going to get held accountable for sure, but some of them will.
Okay. Do you think that the administrators who enabled this horror show, this institutionalized horror show, do you think that any administrators, do you sincerely believe that any administrators are going to be held accountable for this? This is basically a crime.
I don't think they will, because they can say they were following the rules that these governing authorities put in place. But they haven't always followed the rules, so we'll see. There's a law firm now just dedicated to represent detransitioners. 4 men, all left their law firms. They started a new law firm in Dallas, Texas.
Can you tell us the name or no?
Yeah, it's Campbell Miller Payne. And there's a 4th guy as well.
Let's put a link to that.
Yeah, there's a 4th guy as well who's a former Super Bowl champ with the Pittsburgh Steelers. But these are 4 dads with 17 kids between them who just felt moved by this. They got a million ways they can make money as lawyers.
Yeah.
But they felt a calling to take this on. I've spoken with them at length, and they've got a number of lawsuits already, and there's a lot more going to be coming.
Good.
So this is their sole focus, and this is what we've needed.
Yeah, and I have to say, Chris, I just find it so, I'm beyond being heartbroken at this point, and I'm just infuriated. I'm utterly infuriated that I hope you're right, but there has to be some kind of accountability for a medical horror show. We cannot conduct just civil societies while people are mutilating the genitals of children. I mean, that's like the gold standard for bad.
They're cutting off the breasts of girls as young as 12 years old in California.
Right.
There's a girl right now. Her name is Layla Jane. Harmeet Dillon is her lawyer. She's suing when she was 13 in grade 8. And she has autism and she had other stuff going on. They cut off her breasts. She's a baby. She's just a little kid. Just out of elementary school. And they put her on testosterone as well and gave her puberty blockers. What the heck? Based on what evidence? None. They take a child's statement and they just run with it. They don't challenge anything. They don't provide any therapy. This is ghoulish.
Ghoulish is the perfect word. Yeah. So I appreciate your work. I appreciate your work. I appreciate what you do. Where can people find you?
Twitter, Instagram, at Billboard Chris. They can go to my website, billboardchris.com. If they want to support me, they can do so through there. But I really just want people to get educated and start talking about this. People say to me all the time, Chris, what can we do?
Literally, that was my final question for you. Yes.
And so the answer is just do something. You have a different skill set than me. You have a different knowledge base, different friends, different connections. Just do something. But once you get in motion and you start doing things, you find other people who are also doing things. And now you've got a team with you.
Yeah.
So if you're in the United States, if you're a mom, join Moms for Liberty.
They're going
to give you toolkits. Run for your school board.
Promote people's videos if you like their videos. Use social media. I'm gonna add to this. It's not specifically about this issue, but it's about the broader problem from the wellspring of this issue is stop donating to your alma mater.
Yes.
Just stop.
Absolutely.
Just stop. Stop donating to your alma mater.
Yeah.
It should be the easiest ask on planet Earth. Right. I'm not asking you to give money. I'm asking you not to give money.
They're sitting on billions anyway that they don't do anything with. They don't need your money.
Yeah.
I mean, Harvard, they have a hedge fund. I mean, it's how many billions of dollars?
Right. I just had a great conversation with Rajiv Malhotra about that and what Harvard's doing to as a critical social justice as a neo-colonial export. Okay, cool. So do something, do anything, find the skill set, find a network of people, be active, get involved. They know where to find you. We're good.
Right. The government isn't going to fix this.
We have to fix this.
We have to fix it.
Great. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it, Chris, very much so. Thank you for watching. Everything we do is under the umbrella of the National Progress Alliance, nationalprogressalliance.org. It's a nonprofit, independent 501c3. Your generous donations keep us going and keep fueling content like this. So please help us out. Make a donation. We very much appreciate it. Thank you.